Good morning, and welcome to the White House Conference on Women's Health Research. President Biden established the first ever Gender Policy Council, which I've had the privilege of leading, with a simple but powerful directive to put women and girls at the heart of everything his administration does. And under his leadership, that is exactly what we've done. From historic reforms to address violence against women and girls, an issue that President Biden has championed since being a U.S. Senator, to fighting for women's economic security, to expanding access to child care for working families, to combating the maternal health crisis, and lowering drug costs for millions of women with Medicare. There's so much more that could be said about the Biden administration's historic achievements, but suffice it to say, there is no greater champion for gender equity and equality than this president. And that brings us to today and the progress we've made already through the White House Initiative on Women's Health Research, which the President and First Lady launched just over a year ago. As those here gathered know all too well, women make up half the population, but for far too long, women's health research has been underfunded and understudied. To close the research gaps and pioneer the next generation of discoveries, the President and the First Lady set out to fundamentally change how we approach and fund women's health research. Since the initiative began, the Biden administration has prioritized women's health research like no prior administration. And I want to take a minute to acknowledge my federal colleagues in this room who made this progress possible across the initiative's 15 constituent agencies, and in particular, Dr. Monica Bertinoli, the director of the National Institutes of Health. Who has been an incredible partner in this work and leader in this work. Over the past year, we've already committed nearly $1 billion for women's health research, which will support groundbreaking and interdisciplinary research on topics like heart health, bone health, menopause, and more. And in his State of the Union address, the President called on Congress to make a bold, transformative investment of $12 billion to support women's health research, including to create a new central fund for women's health research at the National Institutes of Health. The President also issued an executive order to direct federal agencies to make changes that will lead to better research and evidence and, in turn, better care for women. As just one example, agencies have strengthened their research and data standards to ensure that women's health is being considered at every point in the research process, from grant applications to data analysis to reporting. These new requirements will help ensure that federal research dollars work harder for women and advance our knowledge of women's health. In his executive order, the President also encouraged agencies to prioritize research on women's midlife health because he knows we need to do more to address research gaps on diseases and conditions that are more likely to occur after menopause, such as rheumatoid arthritis, heart attack, and osteoporosis. To close these gaps, agencies are developing robust research agendas to improve prevention, diagnosis, and treatment, and strengthening data collection on women's midlife health. We're confident that these new investments and the policies we've put in place across the Biden administration will contribute to future research breakthroughs, new treatment guidelines, and ultimately better health care and outcomes for women. I'll close by saying thank you to the Milken Institute for their partnership on this important conference, and thank you to all of you who are gathered here today. As I look around this room, I see so many trailblazers who've been fighting to advance women's health research for generations and for the next generation. It's your commitment and your work that have advanced the field and brought us to this moment of opportunity. Together, we will continue to improve the health and lives of women everywhere. Thank you.
Please welcome Chair of the White House Initiative on Women's Health Research, Dr. Carolyn Missouri.
Good morning. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you today. to thank you and all those who have made the work of the White House Initiative on Women's Health Research possible, to celebrate the far-reaching collaborative work of the initiative, and to bring greater clarity to the enduring commitment to carry this work forward and to the opportunities that are before us now. I came to the White House as a clinician, a researcher, and the founder of the Interdisciplinary Women's Health Research Center at the Yale School of Medicine. And I've directed that center for 25 years. Over those years, thanks to the efforts of many, including people in this audience, colleagues across the nation, and those who came before us, women's health is now a recognized field of scientific study. It spans the breadth of health conditions that women experience, and there has been exponential growth in the meaningful research showing how health and disorders can differ for women and men, and the underlying basis for those differences, which can then translate into the development of targeted treatment and prevention strategies. Moreover, research has within its focus the development of data-driven interventions resulting in innovations in care, and importantly, there has been the successful development of new careers in women's health research, which will propel research and empirically based care into the future. And so, based on my experience, the scientific foundation is built. The stage is set for the further discovery and implementation of findings that are needed to improve women's health. And right now, we are at a very special moment. It's a special moment in the history of women's health research in that never before has there been such awareness, enthusiasm, support, and momentum from government, academic research centers, nonprofits, philanthropy, and industry, as well as from advocacy organizations and long-term devoted leaders for women, such as Maria Shriver, who all want to remedy the gap in knowledge on the health conditions that affect women uniquely, differently, and or disproportionately than they do men. We are at this special point in time, because Dr. Biden and this administration have raised the national consciousness on the importance of women's health research and the value of investing in women's health. From listening sessions to lab tours at research institutions across the nation to speaking directly with women and innovators, Dr. Biden has heard firsthand about the health concerns women face and the research that can address these concerns when we invest in women's health. Since the President launched the initiative, the First Lady has led the way. The result has been a comprehensive federal effort to spur innovation in women's health, to ensure that federally funded health research works harder for women, and to encourage mission-driven partnerships across sectors to close research gaps in women's health. And now, we have the opportunity to build on the initiative's momentum and invest in ambitious new research, generate clinically relevant data, and develop and implement the needed groundbreaking treatments for women. If we grow the scope and depth of women's health research, women's lives will improve, families will benefit, and the nation will thrive. In closing, I thank all of you for the work that you do and for caring about the health and lives of women. Thank you.
Please welcome founder of the Women's Alzheimer's Movement, Maria Shriver.
How beautiful does this room look, and how beautiful does everybody who's in this room look on this day. Good morning to all of you who are doctors, advocates, activists, researchers, and all-around badasses. That is you that I am talking to. Give yourself a round of applause. On this morning, may we all take a moment to celebrate the extraordinary accomplishments of the groundbreaking White House initiative on women's health research that was launched just 1 year ago. In 1 year, everybody in this room kicked butt. This is indeed a moment to celebrate, to give thanks, to acknowledge all that got accomplished, because everyone had a vision. They had a vision and a purpose that was larger than any one person. And what got done because everybody was brave, everybody was relentless, and everybody reached high. What got accomplished was and is historic, starting with the fact that not, as you heard earlier, not until this president and this first lady did we ever have a White House mandate regarding women's health research. Not until the Bidens did anyone ever think to make women's health and research a priority for the federal government. Let that sink in. So thank you, Mr. President, and I know he'll be joining us in just a bit, and thank you, Dr. Biden, for recognizing this issue is one of health equity and justice for American women. Thank you to Jennifer Klein, Dr. Missouri, Secretary Becerra, and everybody who worked to prioritize women's health research and pulled off everything that you just heard about this morning. There are 167.5 million American women in this country, women of every age, ethnicity, race, religion, and a political affiliation whose lives will be forever changed by the work that got accomplished this past year and the work that is yet to come. Let us remember that the commitment to change the future for women's health started here, inside this House, that has the promise and the potential to impact the world. You know, every time I walk into this house, I think of my mother, Eunice Kennedy Shriver, and she loved this place for a whole host of reasons, but she understood the power and the possibility that it holds. She knew better than most that those who live here matter. What they're interested in changes our nation. It changes the conversation that our nation has, and most importantly, it changes lives. She always told me, Maria, do not be afraid to go to whoever holds the power if you really want to get something big done. And that's why I went to Joe Biden. On a Saturday morning, I spoke to her about the lack of funding, the lack of research in women's health, and the opportunity for her and this administration to do something historic, something transformative, even life-changing, which was to level the playing field for women when it comes to health research. And she took it from there, and in record time, coordinated the biggest revolution in how women and girls in this country will have their future physical and mental health needs met. I've been around a long time, as many in this audience have also been, and I have never seen government work this quickly. You in this room are part of this historic undertaking, this seismic transformation in women's health. And every single person in this room knows what is at stake moving forward. Without our health, we cannot work, we cannot parent, we cannot be caregivers. And we also recognize that everybody in this room is one diagnosis away from a life-changing moment that could jeopardize the very communities and the families who depend on each and every one of us. I really hope that this effort to prioritize women's health expands way beyond our government. I hope that every tech founder, philanthropist, innovator, scientist, researcher, every elected official in this room and beyond joins in this clarion call for justice and equity. As you heard this year, the President also called on Congress to pledge $12 billion towards the future of women's health research. That's what it will take, he said, to bring us to parity, to get the women in this country the answers that they and we need in order to make sound, informed healthcare decisions that will save lives. What else will it take? It will take all of us working together to build something new. Women all across this nation of all faiths, races, and political persuasions will need to tell our stories, and we will need to demand justice and fairness for women and girls. You know, when I was First Lady of California, I often invoked the Roman goddess Minerva, not just because she was on the California state seal, but because she was a goddess of wisdom and she was a warrior. Minerva knew when to put on her helmet and fight, and she knew when to take it off and talk about compassion and justice and wisdom. I believe every single woman in this country is a Minerva who can and will fight for something way larger than herself. Minerva vanquished everything she set her brilliant mind to. And I believe moving forward, this effort will take all of our brilliant minds and our open hearts as well. It will be hard, no doubt about that, but it will galvanize the best among us. It will spur us into action and prove yet again that reaching for the stars is within our grasp. There is no doubt in my mind that we will make good on this pledge to continue to transform women's health. No doubt in my mind that we will be able to show women across this nation that they are valued, that they are worthy, that their lives matter, and that their stories are real. We women do brave, hard things because we recognize that brave, hard things are what create a more just, a more tender, and more loving world. Emerson once wrote that what lies behind us and what lies in front of us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. So today, I hope we can all tap into what lies within us and light it on fire. Thank you very much, and thank you, Dr. Biden.
Please welcome Executive Vice President of Milken Institute Health, Esther Krofa.
Welcome to the first ever White House Conference on Women's Health Research. This conference was organized in collaboration with the White House Initiative on Women's Health Research and the Milken Institute to advance health research and discuss how to continue making progress on improving women's health. I would like to begin by recognizing and thanking leaders, so many of you who are in this room, and many who are in labs and clinics and communities who have worked tirelessly for decades with passion and creativity to move the needle on women's health. Because of the seeds sown by these champions, we are here today. The accomplishments of the White House Initiative in this past year alone has been extraordinary. Not only do we have energy and momentum on our side, but we are seeing results across research, industry, and advocacy. We have seen increased collaborations and elevation of women's health as a priority because of the leadership of the White House. More investment of funds are going into capital for women's health innovation. More teams are being built to scale innovations on everything from autoimmune disease to menopause to digital health solutions. Over the next hour and a half, you will hear from leaders at the cutting edge of research and innovation working to move us forward. We will start with 3 dynamic presentations from researchers at the front lines and 2 panels of leaders addressing the business case for investing in women's health and leaders using their voice to move women's health forward for the many, many years to come. Today is all about hope and excitement, and I hope that all of you can feel that today. Advances have been made to improve women's health, but there are many more areas to tackle. Data show that we face persistent underinvestment in research on women's health across many different disease conditions. Although 31 years ago, Congress passed the NIH Revitalization Act, requiring women and people of color to be included in NIH-funded clinical trials, underrepresentation of women in clinical trials, particularly in early stage, persists. In the US, only 4% of healthcare-related research and development efforts are targeted specifically at women's health issues. Addressing these gaps could lead to improvements in women's health outcomes, increased years spent in good health, reduced years of disease, and reductions in disruptions to work productivity. We have, as women, significant market potential. Investments addressing the women's health gap could potentially boost the global economy by $1 trillion annually by 2040 and add more women who stay longer in the workforce. We must change how we approach and fund research on women's health. At the Milken Institute, we've been working with many of the people in this room to design funding and partnership solutions to bridge gaps and spur innovation. We hope to engage many more of you as we put together a coalition of the willing, a network that can provide resources for improved research, allow for better data sharing, scale up investments in women's health. We are just at the beginning of the sea change. Progress is possible and can be achieved through partnership. Let's move with haste to create and solidify collaborations to improve women's health. And now, please join me in welcoming our first speakers to the stage, discussing the next wave of scientific innovation in women's health. I'd like to introduce Dr. Marlena Fazo of the University of Southern California. Please join me. Dr. Martha Galati of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center Smith Heart Institute. Join me. And Dr. Lisa Mosconi of Weill Cornell Medicine to join me, please.
We have been able to walk on the moon for decades, yet women are still dying from nausea and vomiting of pregnancy. Nausea and vomiting affects approximately 70% of all pregnancies and leads to 23 days of missed work. It costs $2.2 billion a year in the United States. Hyperemesis gravidarum is the severe end of the clinical spectrum and leads to 60 missed days of work. We now know that it is also associated with adverse outcomes, including preterm birth, increased risk for preeclampsia, postpartum depression, PTSD, and with children, it leads to increased risk for neurodevelopmental delay and autism spectrum disorder, and even smaller brains at age 10. It's not surprising because of the severe nutritional deficiencies these women face during pregnancy. In 1999, I suffered nausea and vomiting so severe I could not eat, drink, or move without violently vomiting. I had to lay completely still on my back. I couldn't even get up to go to the bathroom. It was torture. My doctor put me on 7 different medications at once, but nothing helped. I was given IV fluids and eventually a feeding tube, but it was too late, and I miscarried at 15 weeks gestation. During that time, my doctor told me that I was exaggerating my symptoms for attention. So after I recovered, I decided to devote my life to finding the cause of hyperemesis gravidarum. So I have a PhD from Harvard in women's health, where I found the first genes for uterine fibroid tumors. So I decided to take a genetics approach to find the cause. I couldn't get support for my work, so I had to work on weekends and nights and Fridays, recruiting over 1,000 patients to study. During the day, I worked on ovarian cancer for 20 years. I'm delighted to say that I have now found the cause of nausea and vomiting in pregnancy. It is... Thank you. It's caused by a hormone called GDF15, and we now have potential ways to both treat and prevent it. So now it is all hands on deck. I'm working to open women's healthcare treatment centers, first focused on hyperemesis gravidarum, so that women can get compassionate care rather than what is currently happening, which is that they go to emergency rooms, waiting on the floor, nauseous for hours, to get treated with IV fluids, sent home, only to have to return again. I'm also working with pharma to develop a drug for hyperemesis and working to do a strategy to test a strategy to prevent hyperemesis gravidarum. I'm eternally grateful to Dr. Biden for shining a much-needed light on women's health, and I know it will improve the health of people for generations to come. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'd first like to thank the First Lady and the President for inviting us all here today. I am Dr. Martha Galati, and I'm a cardiologist and the Associate Director, of the Barbara Streisand Women's Heart Center at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles, California. We had the honor of having the First Lady with us about a year ago, talking about heart disease and the research that needed to be done in order to save more women's hearts, given that heart disease is the leading killer of women in the United States. I'm here today to tell you about the progress that has been made in just a short 1 year's time, and of course, the work that we need to do. So we have led a study called the Warrior Study, which has just been completed. I don't get to share the results with you because we don't even know the results. But the Warrior Study was examining women with ischemic heart disease who have small vessel disease. When ischemic heart disease, just to be aware of what that is, that's when people experience chest pain or equivalent symptoms due to reduced blood flow to the heart. For men, often it is due to an obstruction in a big vessel in the coronary artery, but for women, it's often the microvasculature. And we don't have any guidelines telling us how to treat that small vessel disease, despite it being such a common problem, partially because we've excluded women from so many of our cardiovascular trials. So this study that we did a randomized trial to determine what is the optimal medical therapy for women with small vessel disease who are experiencing such severe symptoms. And in a short few months, we will have the Warrior results available to you all. There's also been other progress. We published recently, in this last year, a paper examining the effect of physical activity on death and death from cardiac causes. We were able to study the National Health Interview Survey, which is from the CDC. And we examined over 400,000 women and men in the United States. And our findings demonstrated that for every minute of exercise, actually women benefited more than men. So for once, we have good news in the cardiology world that women did do better And maybe one day the guidelines will actually represent different amounts of exercise that we're being told to do. We don't always have to be like little men. So that's some of the work. There's been some exciting developments related to preeclampsia or hypertension during pregnancy and identifying how it affects future risk for cardiovascular disease. Additionally, colleagues of mine at Cedars-Sinai have developed biomarkers to better predict who is going to develop preeclampsia, and that way we might be able to treat people earlier and prevent the consequences of preeclampsia, but also in the future potentially protect them from the future cardiovascular risk. There's also been developments in a disease state in cardiology called heart failure. Heart failure is when the heart doesn't pump effectively. And we know that uniquely for women who undergo breast cancer therapy, they are more likely to develop heart failure as a result of the excellent chemotherapy, yet it does damage to the heart. So we haven't really had any treatment for that, but a recent study called the SARA study was just done in this last year, and it demonstrated that using a medication called an ARNI, or an angiotensin receptor neprilysin inhibitor, if we give that medication, we are more likely to reduce further damage to heart muscle for people who have cancer. And what was also remarkable about this study was not just the amazing results that they demonstrated, but this was a study that enrolled 90% women. When do we hear about that in our cardiology world especially? So these are excellent things for us to celebrate, but the work is obviously not done. Cardiology, cardiovascular research has predominantly been focused on men, and basic research, animal research, and human clinical trials have often left women out of those studies. So we still have to do further work. When we think about women's health, we need to think beyond the reproductive organs and think about the entirety of the woman and how we want to keep them safe. The initiative by the First Lady not only is going to save hearts, but it's going to save women's lives. So we thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Hello. Thank you for having me. It is a real pleasure and an honor to be here. I'm Dr. Lisa Mosconi. I am director of the Alzheimer's Prevention Program in the Women's Brain Initiative at Weill Cornell Medicine, New York Presbyterian. I currently serve as a program director at Wellcome Leap, a global organization dedicated to advancing research in human health, led by the former director of DARPA, Dr. Regina Dugan. I am a neuroscientist specializing in the early detection and prevention of Alzheimer's disease with a strong focus on women's brain health. Why women? We have known since the 1990s that after aging itself, simply being a woman is the strongest risk factor for Alzheimer's disease, to the point that today, nearly 2/3 of all Alzheimer's patients are women, namely postmenopausal women. I've been studying this connection for almost 20 years, in part because Alzheimer's affects the women in my family. And we've made progress for sure, but there's still much that we do not know. What we have learned is that women's brains age differently from men's brains, and menopause plays a role here. As a society, we associate menopause with the function of the ovaries and the end of fertility, but in reality, menopause impacts the brain just as much as it does the ovaries. Hot flashes, night sweats, insomnia, depression, anxiety, brain fog, memory lapses. Those are all neurological symptoms that come from the ways that menopause changes the brain. We have also learned that so-called sex hormones are brain hormones too. And estrogen in particular is a neuroprotective hormone that literally shields the brain from aging and from disease. So when estrogen declines, the brain enters a window of vulnerability during which the risk for Alzheimer's can increase. Now, to be clear, all women go through menopause, but not all women develop Alzheimer's or dementia. So the real question is, what keeps us healthy and what makes some women vulnerable instead? So what we have learned is that the longer reproductive span and the longer exposure to estrogen throughout life may protect against dementia, whereas estrogen deprivation, especially following early or induced menopause, has been linked with an increased risk. We have also learned that there is a connection between Alzheimer's and menopause hormone therapy, which we need more research to fully clarify. But I will say this. About 130 million American women use some form of hormone therapy, whether birth control, menopause hormone therapy, endocrine therapies for reproductive cancers, and yet we have never been able to directly measure the effects of these therapies in the brain. Never. This needs to change. We and others have done several studies mapping the impact of menopause and hormone therapy on the brain. My team and I, in collaboration with Dr. Roberta Diaz-Brinton, who is here today, have been looking at alterations in brain structure, function, energy metabolism, which you can see there in the slide, brain connectivity, and overall biochemistry. And we are indebted to the NIH, NIA, to Maria Shriver, to the Women's Alzheimer's Movement, and everyone who supported our work. But these are only the first steps. Today, menopause remains one of the most under-researched, under-diagnosed, under-treated, and underfunded fields of medicine, and so is the care of women's brain health overall. It is my hope that with more research, being a woman will no longer be a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease, and that my daughter and the next generations will have answers and effective solutions. And so I will close by noting that we owe women centuries of research. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you to these leaders for sharing their insights and experiences about the next wave of scientific innovation for women's health. We will now take a brief moment to set up the stage for our panel discussion on the business case for women's health. Thank you very much.
Trish Stroman of Boston Consulting Group, Dr. Jyoti Gupta of GE Healthcare, Jess Lee of Sequoia Capital, Stephanie Sassman of Genentech, and Dr. Johanna Grossman of the New York Stock Exchange.
Hello, and welcome to our panel to discuss the business case for investing in women's health. I'm really excited to turn the corner from all this research and innovation that's so important to talk about how we bring products to women and providers. I'm Trish Stroman. I'm a senior partner with BCG, where I've spent nearly 20 years working across sectors to support clients in the healthcare industry. At BCG, we've mobilized a team to explore the investment case for women's health. We believe there is incredible unmet need, which we've all heard about this morning, but also a data-backed reason for companies to invest in this space. We're excited about the opportunities we can now shine a spotlight on for stakeholders across the ecosystem. Our analysis shows that just in the US, we are collectively leaving tens of billions of dollars on the table by not giving women the treatment that they need. I'll give you 3 examples, all conditions we've heard about today. First, in osteoporosis, we estimate a total addressable market of over $20 billion by 2030. That's nearly 4 times the market today if women with osteoporosis were diagnosed and treated appropriately. In Alzheimer's, which we just heard about, the total addressable market could be 10x by 2030 if women who are often misdiagnosed or diagnosed too late receive the diagnosis and treatment that they needed. And in menopause, where there's incredible unmet need, we estimate a market of up to $35 billion if women with moderate and severe symptoms were able to seek the treatment they needed. All of that doesn't even fully account for all of the innovation that we heard about this morning. So, with those numbers as food for thought, I'm really excited to hear from our panelists to tell us more about where they see the opportunities. So first, let me introduce everyone. Dr. Jyoti Gupta is President and CEO of Women's Health and X-Ray at GE Healthcare. She's a driving force behind transformative innovations in medical technology, including innovations for women's health, like mammography and bone density testing. Next, we have Jess Lee, who is a trailblazer in gender diversity in the tech and investment worlds. She's a partner and chief product officer at Sequoia Capital, a venture firm based in Silicon Valley. Her portfolio includes Maven Clinic. She's also co-founder of All Raise, a nonprofit dedicated to creating parity for women in the tech ecosystem. Next, we have Stephanie Sassman. She's a portfolio leader in women's health at Genentech, which is part of the Roche Group, where she develops comprehensive solutions for women's health conditions. She's also works to address sex and gender disparities through positions in women's health focus groups at both WEF and the Gates Foundation. And finally, we have Dr. Johanna Grossman, who's the head of healthcare and life sciences capital markets at the New York Stock Exchange. As a champion for innovation in women's health, she leverages her expertise with life science to connect healthcare companies with vital investment opportunities. Thank you, all of you, for being here. Jess, if I can start with you. You're an investor across lots of categories at Sequoia. How does women's health market compare to other markets that you're watching? And maybe how does it compare with other industries that have gone through this kind of acceleration that we're experiencing in women's health just now?
So what's fascinating about women's health is how underhyped of a category it is compared to its massive market potential. I mean, we're talking about a market that affects half of humanity, yet the sector has remained pretty underfunded and underinvested in. You know, at Sequoia, we've had the privilege of partnering over the last 50 years with companies like Apple, NVIDIA, Google, DoorDash, Airbnb, and in the women's health space, Maven Clinic. Kate Ryder is over there. She's a total force of nature. It's the largest telemedicine network in women's and family health. Also Natera, which does prenatal testing and cancer screening and breast cancer screening. But what we found is sometimes the most underhyped sectors are the best places to build very large businesses. That said, it does require pioneers, trailblazers. I'm so grateful for all the people in this room who are those early believers coming together to have this conversation. I also think some of the most obvious markets are sometimes hiding in plain sight. And the reason they're hiding in plain sight is actually tied to the demographics of the people in power. And so venture is an industry that is, when I started 8 years ago and when Kate started the company 10 years ago, I think venture was 7% women. Today it is, I think, 17% women. And so the conversations have started to change. And when Kate was first pitching rooms full of men, I think they just didn't quite relate, didn't quite see what we here, I think, all see as an obviously large market. And so she grinded her way towards building what is now a $1.7 billion company that covers fertility, maternity, postpartum, pediatrics, parenting, and now menopause as well. And that's been such a journey. I think another example of, because you asked for an analogy of a market that's been hiding in plain sight, circa 2004 to 2008, if you looked at social networking, a lot of older VCs didn't understand the power of connecting with college kids, didn't get this thing that was happening with the kids, didn't realize that that could turn into what is today a $1.5 trillion company. Meta, WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook all came together to form Meta. We're grateful to have been investors in two of them. And it's just very obvious now that venture capital firms should hire young people to stay on top of the Gen Z trends and what's happening in order to make sure they catch these investments. And similarly, I think venture firms are realizing they have to hire women who will see these opportunities, but it does require pioneers like Kate and many of the people in this room to be funded, all your scientific research. We should talk after this. It requires those big businesses to be built for, I think, the capital to move, for the power to move, and for it to be culturally known that, hey, women is big business.
Awesome. Thank you. We have the venture perspective. I would love, actually, Stephanie, to come to you a bit for the industry perspective. Our analysis showed that a lot of that untapped market is actually sitting in the biopharma sector. I would love to hear from you about how Roche thinks about this. What are the biggest opportunities that you're seeing, and what will it take to realize them?
Thanks, Trish. It's great to be here, and thank you so much to everybody for all your work on this. When we think about women's health, we truly start with keeping women well. We have diagnostics as well as medicines, and so supporting them if they do get sick, and really thinking about women's health for conditions that uniquely, differently, and predominantly impact women. And so from that perspective, if we think about the business opportunity, I think there's sort of two camps, right? And we've heard about both of them this morning. There's these conditions that uniquely impact women, the so-called bikini medicine, that have been completely under-researched. And I think we heard this morning about research for hyperemesis that was having to be done on people's spare time, right? That should not be the case. But if we think about a condition like endometriosis, it impacts 1 in 10 women for decades of their life, right? It's one of the leading causes of infertility, not to mention school days missed, work days missed, pain that women experience. And if you look at the market for that presently, it's around $1 billion. That's the total market. That's very small. If you think about the size of the women that are impacted by that, 1 in 10. If you also look at the pipeline, it's also quite small. But it is an area that, as we have more scientific understanding of the disease, as we have this research come out, we are able to bring forward new innovations that are truly disease modifying in conditions like this. And there are very few disease areas that impact so many patients that don't have any disease-modifying therapies. And so they make them very attractive as you can bring in those disease-modifying therapies and early diagnosis to really make a huge value contribution to the healthcare system and to women, and obviously it's a triple bottom line. The second camp, I would say, and we heard about it also this morning, is these conditions that impact women differently. If we think about cardiology, right, the cardiovascular diseases, the neurological conditions, these are conditions that impact huge amounts of patients. But if we look at women, some of them impact women predominantly, like if we think about Alzheimer's disease or MS, or impact women differently when we think about cardiology. And as we understand the science to that, that also opens up opportunity, right? For women to be diagnosed earlier and for women to be treated earlier. And so there's enormous opportunity. If we look at, what are the biggest investment areas that companies are making? They're in oncology, they're in cardiometabolic diseases, they're in neurological conditions. And right now, obviously, we heard that there's imbalances in really understanding sex and gender. But when you can understand sex and gender, you can bring forward differentiated products. And those differentiated products will create an enormous value. And the value will be for patients, but it will also be for our economy. And that will be a value for the system. And so there's tremendous opportunity in those two camps. And I would say that the research and the things that we're investing in are really what helps to unlock that.
Great. Thanks so much, Stephanie. I love making that connection from the research to the opportunities for companies. It's so important. Jody, if I can come back to you, misdiagnosis or just lack of diagnosis is at the heart of a lot of the challenges we've talked about, both for women, but also to unlock these markets. I would love to hear from you where you see opportunities in the diagnostic space, and what will it take to realize them? What are some of the challenges?
So in the diagnosis space, lots and lots of different areas of opportunity. I'd say one sort of on the digital AI side, the second would be in precision medicine, and then the third in early screening and detection. And so maybe I'll give a few examples. On the digital side, there is so much data generated by our healthcare systems in the US and globally. 97% of the data that's generated is unstructured and goes unused, right? But there is so much rich information in that data. And so really leveraging generative AI, large language models, and looking at multimodal data, so imaging, lab results, pathology results, genomics, right, and connecting the dots across that, I think has a lot of opportunity. As some examples, women go get mammograms. Mammograms are traditionally used for breast cancer detection, but you can actually also see now, research has shown, breast arterial calcifications, which are a sign of cardiovascular disease, disproportionately affects more women. I used to be in ophthalmology before. Retinal imaging can potentially provide you early indicators for Alzheimer's disease. Again, disproportionately affects more women, right? A lot of women don't go and get their DEXA scans for bone density, but you may go get an X-ray if you broke your leg, or you may go get a CT scan for something. There is data that shows a CT scan or an X-ray can provide bone density information, right? So opportunistically. And these are just a few examples. But if you think of all the data that exists out there, and to your point, things hiding, in this case, perhaps not in plain sight, but there is so much information hiding in the data that is already existing. And so leveraging new tools like Gen AI to unlock, I think can have a rapid impact. On the early detection and screening side, I think endometriosis has been, and just pelvic health in general, has been very, very underserved. Again, hiding in plain sight. MRI is used traditionally. It's been around for decades. It is a great tool to be used for detecting endometriosis. There is no real great non-invasive solution out there today. Usually you have to do surgery. Same goes for ovarian cancer, uterine cancer. There aren't many tools. MRI exists in plain sight. It just hasn't been adopted. And so we at GE Healthcare have done a partnership now, a research partnership with UCSD, where we're creating protocols and basically an atlas and a database to say, how can we use advanced imaging techniques and bring them to the masses to detect endometriosis and other pelvic health diseases. And then precision medicine, I think, is one, to your point, what's innovative and exciting. I think extremely exciting. Radiopharmaceuticals, which are very, very targeted and can help you detect and show up on an image exactly what's happening. I think that is sort of the heart of precision medicine, getting the right diagnosis and the right treatment to the right patient at the right time. And really, radiopharmaceuticals, I think, is a new area that's rapidly growing. We're seeing it for Alzheimer's. You can detect beta amyloid plaque in brain. We're seeing it for coronary artery disease. We're seeing it for estrogen receptor breast cancer. So that is one area that I personally and us at GE Healthcare are very excited about. And I think the new CMS rule allowing for now separate payments for nuclear imaging agents, I think just unlocks a lot of potential. And as a result of that, we're seeing a lot more investment in that space. And then lastly, care delivery, right? How we deliver care. In breast cancer, when a woman goes for her screening exam, if she has to be called back, it can sometimes be weeks before she gets her next appointment to go for the next imaging, and then to go for the biopsy, and then potentially get a result. We've seen data show it can be as high as 30 days. In some countries, even longer. And so this concept of how do you do sort of a same-day diagnosis or one-stop clinic where you can get your screening and your diagnosis and your biopsy all in one day to reduce the time from a month to just a couple of days. It's sort of another way to sort of get to the early diagnosis. What it would take to recognize this, I think one is people, right? People who are really, really passionate and care about problems. I think at the end of the day, investors and companies invest in people. So I think that's one. If you have that, though, then it really comes down to are you solving the right problems? Are there right clinical outcomes? And is there a return on investment? Right? At the end of the day, we are running a business. We do need to generate a positive return of investment, but that allows us then to reinvest in the next technology, allows us to create jobs, allows us to take these technologies in underserved areas as well as outside the US. And so, making sure the business case makes sense, making sure there's a regulatory pathway, a reimbursement pathway, ensuring you're not adding unnecessary administrative burden to the healthcare system. If you talk to most hospital CEOs today, they will tell you how they are just short on staff. And so, fitting in sort of the practicality and the realities of how care is delivered.
I love that you brought in all the parts of the ecosystem that have to work together to make this all happen. Thank you. Johanna, if I can come to you and maybe go back to the investment side for a bit. You have a very cross-cutting view across the health industry. I would love to get your thoughts of where is private capital flowing in women's health right now, and maybe where is it not flowing as much as we hope it would?
Sure, Trish, thank you. And you've heard a little bit about some of the challenges, which I think I'm going to start with the challenges. So for the average investor, for the average person not in this room, women's health is a new sector. It's a new space, right? And what that means is that there are no real established benchmarks for investors to grab onto to understand, yes, if I invest now, I'm going to get this return of investment in 5 or 10 years from now. So that's one specific challenge. The second challenge is that we were coming out of a difficult funding environment, particularly in life sciences and healthcare, and women's health was not immune to that. Now, having said that, we're all here in this room talking about all the great advancements, and I think over the past, I would say year to year and a half, we're really starting to hear about women's health, and that is bringing the attention of other general investors into this space, which is exciting. Specifically in, for example, biopharma. So if you look at historically where women's health investments were made, it was typically more on the health tech side. But actually, over the course of the last year and a half, based off of the amazing data that is being discovered, we've heard about some of them today, that's bringing in money, private capital, into those spaces. The addition of government funding, right, from the White House, from the NIH, also into the space is also attracting private capital because in some ways that helps to subsidize some of the research that's desperately needed, right? So looking at this year in particular, I'm super excited at the fact that, there's about a dozen biopharmas in women's health areas or developing a women's health product that received over 50 million in venture funding this year alone. And I think as we continue to come out of this tough, difficult funding environment into 2025, and as we get more data, that those are some of those spotlight opportunities that perhaps will help women's health and the women's health sector break into the mainstream.
Thanks, Johanna. Maybe if I can stay with you for one follow-up. We have folks in this room from across the healthcare space. So we have researchers and innovators. We also have policymakers and CEOs. I would love to hear what specifically can this group do to continue to accelerate women's health investment in particular?
I think we need to continue to build this community. At the New York Stock Exchange, we have the distinct privilege of sitting in between investors and companies and the entire capital markets ecosystem, and we're using our platform to shine a light on the importance of women's health. 2 years ago, my co-organizer, Jessica Federer, and I came up with the idea of let's bring investors together to talk about women's health. This year, we hosted our second year. Dr. Biden, thank you so much for being our keynote at that event. But this year, we brought in over $1 trillion in AUM, or investors representing over $1 trillion in AUM together to talk about What's new in the space? Let's share ideas. Let's share our thesis. But more importantly, get to know each other, get to know the ecosystem, build those connections, because that's how we're going to drive this forward. So I would encourage and tell everybody here, let's continue to build this community and the connectivity amongst us.
Awesome. It's a great call to action for all of us. We are running short on time, so I'm going to do one rapid fire question straight across the panel. End of year, end of a really incredible year for women's health is a great time for some reflection. So I'd love to hear from all of you, 1 minute or less. One thing to celebrate in 2024, and then what are you most excited about, or what's your kind of thing to watch in women's health for 2025? And we can go straight down the row.
So I think for 2024, a lot to celebrate, but I think the biggest one for me really is this, right? We started over, a year ago, last year this time, there was no women's health initiative from the White House. And so this, to me, I think the progress and the momentum and the energy that has been generated has just been phenomenal. When we met with some of the staff here in January this year, we talked about the White House should really do something big and something bold. Little did we know, a couple weeks later, there's ARPA-H, and then there's the DoD funding, and then there's NIH. And so I think the White House really showed us what is possible. It started conversations in our organizations. I think we felt empowered. I certainly felt empowered to use all the data and all the momentum to talk within my organization and also reach outside. I was here at an event, in the spring. I knew one person maybe in the room. Now I've come back and I know so many of you. And so I think it's really just this work has brought the community, as you mentioned, together. And I'm just so grateful and so thankful. And it's the message I'd sent to John around Thanksgiving. I think for 2025, it's really around how do we build on this momentum? The foundation has been laid, so how do we continue? I'm really excited to see what we continue to do together. I'm really excited. You've started a great initiative. I am going to watch closely and see what you do next as well. And so, that's my 2025 what to watch.
I think I'm excited for the same thing in 2024 and 2025, and that is menopause, which is millennials are starting to enter menopause and are starting to tell the stories, to talk about it. Millennials created wellness culture, destigmatized mental health, and I think just sharing the stories of menopause, which has been sort of not talked about, not discussed, and therefore not funded, both on the research side and on the business side. Just telling the story, I think, creates a catalyst for change and people to know about the problem in the first place. And so I'm just very excited for that.
Yeah, the highlight for 2024 has just been really the amp up of the discussion about women's health, starting at JP Morgan with the first official women's health event, going to Davos with the report released about the $1 trillion economic opportunity that we have in the world, to the ARPA-H sprint. It feels like there's been so many highlights of really changing the conversation and bringing in different stakeholders, which has to start, obviously, with patients and with women. When I look forward to 2025, I think that there's a lot of momentum and partnership to continue. One of the bright spots that I also see is what we can do as employers and forward-thinking employers. And so we have launched Maven and the menopause benefit at our company. It launched more than a year ago in Women's Day 2023. And it's been transformational, but also just looking at our women's health benefits across the line. We recently, as part of our Moonshot commitment, did one-stop shop screening for women where they could get cervical cancer, HPV DNA screening, breast cancer screening, and other screening. And so I think there's a lot of bright spots with regard to employers because it's, again, the triple bottom line. It's going to make a difference to employers' bottom lines, but also, of course, to the women that they serve.
All right, to add on to everything here, I have to come up with something new, but something that I'm actually very excited about is the collaborative that WHAM has created of multi-billion-dollar funds to help drive investments in women's health. So that's definitely one. And then for next year, selfishly, I'm very excited to host our third annual Women's Health Investor Summit at the New York Stock Exchange. And I hope to see many of you there.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. It is so great to have you and to really continue this conversation around investment. I think I am most heartened to see just such alignment between meeting the needs of women and also real market opportunity, which means we can make this happen. And we've coined a new term. I wasn't expecting that out of this panel, so I'm taking Melanopause with me today.
For that.
So that's it for us. Thank you, everybody.
Please welcome Liz Plosser of Women's Health, Nancy Brown of the American Heart Association, Robin Arzone of Peloton, Linda Goler-Blount of Black Women's Health Imperative, Dr. Elizabeth Coman of NYU Langone, and Joanna Strober of MIDI Health.
Thank you. I am Liz Plosser. I'm the editor-in-chief of Women's Health. I've been at the brand for 7 years, and I oversee every platform from print to digital, social, video, live events, where we had the great pleasure of having Dr. Biden speak at our recent first ever health summit. So it is a total honor and pleasure to be here today, leading this panel of esteemed women in health. We have with us nonprofit leaders and advocates, philanthropy and business leaders, communicators, and I am so excited to unpack with each of you the roles that you play and the path forward for women's health. I know each of you personally, or I know of you, and now we know each other personally today as well. And I've had the privilege of being able to share your perspective and your expertise across our channels at Women's Health. Thank you for sharing your stories and all of your knowledge. I want to begin by asking each of you to share with us your why. Why are you here today? Why is women's health so important to you personally? And we'll begin with you, Joanna.
Yeah, so, everyone is starting with their personal stories, and I think that's what's so actually amazing about this group is that people here are truly trying to solve problems that impact them, impact their mothers, their daughters, their friends. For me, it was very personal. I was around 47 and at the top of my career, and I stopped sleeping. And we all have that experience, or many of us, actually everyone probably will, where you go and it's amazing how everyone goes through menopause. So what happens, you stop sleeping. You wake up in the middle of the night and actually your bed might be soaking wet. You kick your partner out because you need their side of the bed. And then you go to work the next day and you're tired. And then you start experiencing brain fog and you start forgetting client names and it starts being very stressful. For me, it was also, I lost my car in the parking lot a few times and I couldn't remember where I parked. And I found it so anxiety provoking, and that was impacting me at home. It was impacting me with my family. It was impacting me at work. I started thinking, wow, can I continue? I have this great career. Can I continue doing this if my body is giving out on me? I also had seen 2 grandparents go through Alzheimer's, so I was scared of that and very concerned that that would happen to me. So I started trying to get care, and honestly, it was impossible. I live in Palo Alto. I couldn't get a doctor's visit. 9 months to get into Stanford in order for someone to see me. I could not find the right person. I went to a primary care doctor. They told me sleeping pills, but said I could only take them once in a while because they're addictive. I went to a sleep specialist. I did not have sleep apnea. all this is what we're all talking about. It's just perimenopause. But honestly, perimenopause is insidious because you don't know you have it. And so it's something that derails us before we even know what's happening. So I ended up quitting my job. I started this company, MIDI Health, and now we're treating, I think we're the biggest menopause clinic in the world, actually. We're treating hundreds of thousands of women. And there are a lot of them are in perimenopause. They're all coming and going, just what we're talking about. What's happening with my body? Can you please help me? So it's incredibly exciting to be able to provide care to all these women. And the most important part is that it's covered by insurance. So you should not have to pay out of pocket for this. This should be insurance-covered care. And so we're working with all the payers around the country, and we are getting insurance-covered care for women in perimenopause and menopause.
Thank you so much, Joanna. I want to move on to Dr. Elizabeth Komen, who is an author as well as a practicing physician. Tell us about your why.
Oh, such a beautiful question, and I'm so deeply honored to be here. So I am a breast oncologist, and I can tell you that two women can have the same biology of their breast cancer, but how they experience their illness is uniquely determined by their culture, by their religion, by the stories they've been told about themselves and their bodies. And so much of my why comes from these sacred interactions that I've had with patients, not just about their cancer diagnosis, but their broader experience with the health system, their MS that was misdiagnosed, their frozen shoulder that went completely ignored and treated with benign neglect, their heart disease that wasn't appropriately addressed. But my real why more recently was a really heartbreaking story. I was taking care of a patient for many years. You can live for a long time with what we call metastatic breast cancer. And I went to see her in the hospital 18 hours before she died. I had cared for her for many, many years. And on her deathbed, sort of gasping for air, I gave her a hug. And she apologized to me on her deathbed for sweating. And I thought to myself, I went back to clinic the next day, how many women have apologized to me? And in this woman's worst dying moment, her subconscious was still filled with apologizing. How many women have apologized to me for scars, for saying, I missed my mammogram because I took my kid to the dentist. And really trying to unpack not just the biology of how much we miss in women's health, which we've heard from these amazing scientists and doctors today, but how we devalue women's bodies. Because a lot of times, I'll go on air and people say, what are the 10 steps to our wellness? I can tell you when you need to get your mammogram. I can tell you when you need to get your colonoscopy. But if you don't value your own health, if society doesn't value women's health care, then we've gone nowhere. And so I'm really just feel so privileged to be part of everybody's why today and our collective power that we have in this room to move the needle towards more equitable care.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Linda Goller-Blount of the Black Women's Health Imperative, will you share your why with us?
Yeah, and I just want to add my thanks. This is an amazing event. Thank you for hosting this. My why, we all have a personal story, but I'm also an epidemiologist, so I tend to bring data to my why. We've talked about the value of women's health, and we talk about it at the really big level, trillions of dollars. But if women had optimal health, it would actually increase corporate earnings by 15 to 20%. Now, I run a nonprofit. My job is not to make money for corporate America at all. But income and poverty are very closely associated with health, as we know. And Black women, despite being overrepresented in the workforce, tend to have lower pay and have higher rates of poverty. So what we see is they tend not to get the standard of care, and they tend not to have the kind of access, and they're certainly not represented in research, and we'll talk about that. But my why also comes from looking at the women that we serve every day, my own family. So my daughter, highly educated, high-resourced, preterm birth is the thing we read about all the time. And she had access to every kind of care, and yet this happened. So if a woman with 3 degrees and a high income can't count on getting the standard of care, might get her breast cancer missed or misdiagnosed, might be ignored when she's complaining about not feeling well after having a baby. If it happens to her, then it can happen to anyone. So my why is to make sure that doesn't happen. We can do better, we know better, and it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we all prevent that and that we all get the standard of care that we deserve.
Thank you. Thank you. And now, Robin Arzon of Peloton.
Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm Robin Arzon. I am Vice President of Fitness Programming at Peloton. I sincerely hoped we have moved together in some way, shape, or form. That is my life's mission, is to get people moving. I was not always an athlete. We talked a little bit today about storytelling. I believe Jessica mentioned, stories being so pivotal to this work. We can see trends, we can read research, but it is my singular mission that women feel at home and empowered in their bodies. Movement is medicine, and sure, I love seeing biomarkers, change, but I more so like to see the spark turn on. I see can't turn to can millions of times a day. A lot of those interactions are virtual, so I consider myself a digital creator, a digital storyteller. My Peloton classes mostly are virtual, and anecdotally, I'm a nicer person after I've moved my body. I'm a better mother, better partner, but I'm also a braver one. And I think rooted in movement, rooted in strength training specifically, I'm glad that is starting to trend, especially for women, that lights a spark. And it's the millions of inflection points that we're all, at various points of view, kind of intersecting on, whether it's the doctor's office, the boardroom, the kitchen table. It's a willingness to use your voice even when it shakes. So my why is getting women to feel at home in their bodies and turn whispers into roars.
Amazing. Whew. Robin knows this, but I definitely relate that movement really matters. And we'll finish up on this why question with you, Nancy Brown of the American Heart Association.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for this amazing gathering. I love the roar part of it. At the American Heart Association, and for me personally, my why is that heart disease is the leading cause of death in women, more than the next 5 causes of death combined. Yet, women and women's health and women's cardiovascular health is underfunded, misdiagnosed, and women are often sent away when they have symptoms of cardiovascular disease. 45% of women over the age of 20, just get your head around that, 45% over the age of 20 have some form of cardiovascular disease, and half of women in this country, because of their cardiovascular health, are ill prepared for pregnancy. So we have a big job to do to raise awareness and to help change the system so that women get ideal cardiovascular care through their life course. For me, my why personally, I always think of my sister, 56 years old, had 2 strokes from undiagnosed atrial fibrillation. That did not have to happen to her. Thank goodness, and I see my dear friend here from our American Stroke Association, she was transported to an American Heart Association designated comprehensive stroke center where she had TPA administered, and she was able to resume her life normally. But her AFib was not diagnosed by world-class doctors until she had her strokes. And this should not happen to women in this country. Women should not be sent away from emergency rooms. Women should not be told that their cardiovascular symptoms are stress and anxiety and that they should go home and get some rest. This still happens to women today, and that is my why.
Thank you, Nancy. All righty, we're going to roll up our sleeves and dig in just a little bit. Robin, I'm going to come back to you. I loved what you said about storytelling, and I'm sure everybody here already follows Robin, but if you don't, you need to. Health influencing across social media platforms is most definitely on the rise. I have feelings, but let's focus on the positive. It builds awareness, education. In many cases, it builds community. And as we've heard earlier today, there are a lot of topics that are becoming more mainstream, like millennial pause and others. So I think that's a real benefit to all of us. But But I want to talk about you specifically because you share your story across your platforms. So what do you think about when you're sharing, and how do you think the rest of us can use some of those platforms to help close these gaps that we've identified today in research?
I mean, I think that there's, when you share a story on social media or in community, right? This is a new way that we are gathered around campfires, right? And this, it feels like you are alone, but really you have the potential to create a cascade, to make a wave. And I think that is what I've seen time and time again on these digital platforms is, it's like, oh, I thought this was just me. And then we realize, oh, not only is it not just me, it's half of the human population probably going to know someone or experience something like this themselves. So the consciousness raising that I've seen in the community building around it is significant, but it's also the willingness to share when you see someone else being vulnerable. I mean, for myself, I was diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic as an adult. It was actually on the eve of me joining Peloton. And I was in many doctors' rooms that were in disbelief that I was still going to be running ultramarathons. My mother, a practicing physician, over 40 years with access, education, had the terrible meandering diagnosis of her MS diagnosis. And it's the shock, it's the disbelief, you're not presenting as a typical patient. And listen, I am one of one limited edition, honey, so you're just gonna have to hear my story. And that is what I want folks to feel empowered to do, right? And we're seeing those connection points, and I find it really exciting that we're able to meet folks where they are, and for young folks. Like I'm really, really filled with hope and promise that my daughter will have greater education, greater access, and be believed about what she's feeling in her body and in between her ears. And the last thing I'll share, as a pregnant person, I have 2 young children. Being an athlete and being a pregnant athlete and receiving care based on the limited data around pregnant athletes was shocking. So I just kind of did my own thing. And I created the first pre- and postnatal program at Peloton. I created programming specifically for pregnant athletes. And I was lifting a barbell. I deadlifted a barbell literally the day that my son was born. So it's possible that we can continue to explore the edges of what was previously told we could or couldn't do.
Awesome. That does not surprise me at all that you were pumping iron the day he came into the world. Linda, I'm going to jump over to you. Autoimmune conditions affect many women, but they impact women of color in disparate and distinctively distressing ways. It's not just that condition. We could say any condition, Alzheimer's, menopause, the list goes on, because data shows that women of color are frequently forced to navigate unique healthcare challenges across every condition, including rare diseases. And it's often because there isn't enough research that specifically includes women of color. Tell us about what you think we can do to close that gap, and what makes you excited about being in this line of work and the future of this work.
Okay, I love optimism. I am the eternal optimist. I have to be. So you're right. I mean, to look at the data, there's gross disparities. We see it in autoimmune diseases. Women overrepresent. I mean, they have 7 times the rates of lupus, for example. Black women have 3 times the rates of lupus as compared to white women. But, we see this in breast cancer, 3x maternal rates, obviously maternal health. I mean, it's sort of across the board. And, part of this is, just our lived experiences, our circumstances. But the thing that we do know is there's no biologic or genetic explanation for this. Race is not biology or genetics. There is a lack of research. We simply don't understand. And for rare diseases, as you mentioned, a black family with a child who's got inexplicable symptoms will wait on average 7 to 9 years longer for a diagnosis as compared to a white family, just to find out what it is. We have someone in our group who was 52 when his cystic fibrosis diagnosis came in. I mean, that's almost unheard of. But when you show up at a physician, there's just not enough data. We talk about getting the standard of care, but if there's no research, your physician, your provider doesn't know what to do. There's no literature for her to refer to for your care. And if you look at research, we've talked about the dearth of research for women's health, but for Black women's health, at the highest level, you're talking less than 2% of all funding goes to explore anything with Black women or women of color. The percentage of researchers at the highest level that NIH funds hasn't changed in 40 years. It's still under 2%. So we've got a long way to go. So at the Black Women's Health Imperative, we're very much focused on, yes, sort of explaining and helping women understand, but solving the problem. So we formed a Rare Disease Diversity Coalition, which is a $20 million, 60-plus member coalition to examine what actually happens. Why can't people get a rare disease diagnosis? Why does it take so long? What are the research gaps? So next year, we'll produce the very first paper that actually looks at clinical trials participation among rare disease patients to see who's actually in the trials. There's a saying, we talk about evidence-based medicine all the time. What becomes evidence depends on who's asking the questions and who they're asking. Some might say who's funding it. But until we change that, then we continue not to have the kinds of answers we need. And the other thing that I'm really excited about and optimistic about is we've launched a breast and cervical cancer research project. So, we've talked about screening of breast cancer and the difference that Black women experience. Again, not biology. This research project will finally answer the question as to when Black women should start screening and how often they should start screening and what the issues are with their treatment and their health outcomes. I'm really excited about finally being able to say to physicians, this is what we know, this is what you ought to do, and then giving women the tools. So until we have the kind of research that we need, we encourage women to ask questions when they go to the doctor. Because it's not that doctors are not trying to provide good care. Some things just don't occur to them. So by prompting them, do I have colon cancer? Do I have breast cancer? Should I do this? It'll at least get a doctor thinking, oh, yeah, I should probably order this test or this screening, or maybe I should refer you to this provider, so that women have the best chance of getting the standard of care while we wait for the research and the data to finally answer the questions that we frankly should have answered a long time ago.
Oof, yes. Thank you so much. Those are staggering statistics. You really put it in great context. And also, I so appreciate some tactical, real-world advice that I think we can all take into our communities. Elizabeth, I'm going to move over to you. You shared a heartbreaking and emotional story just a second ago about your patient on her deathbed. And you've also said before in your writing, we need to stop apologizing for our medical needs and start asking questions that will lead to better knowledge and better health. I feel a lot of momentum here today on this stage and amongst all of you. What can we do to keep this going?
We will keep it going. I have complete and entire faith that we will, and I just want to dovetail on what you said. I think in order to keep this going, we have to think about all the spaces that we experience medicine and scientific discovery. I mean, we're in the White House after all. I don't need to tell this group that it's inextricably linked to political landscapes as well. But we have the power to change who has a seat at the table and who we're listening to, because you couldn't be more right that unless we are listening and having an open mind to what are the issues that women are actually facing, what can we invest in? And we've got Lucy Perez here from McKinsey and WHAM, Carolee Lee, who talk so much about the importance of investing in women's health, but also understanding what women actually experience in order to drive the research forward, from the preclinical models to the exam room to what women feel when they go home. I'll share with you one quick story. I was doing a study for many years trying to develop a blood test that would pair with mammograms, and it's still ongoing to see when a woman goes for a mammogram and may need a call back, does she actually need the biopsy? Can we defer the biopsy? And I was working with this genius guy in the lab, and I was the one that was consenting women after their abnormal mammograms to get a blood test. Now you can imagine you have an abnormal mammogram, you don't know what the next steps are. It's very hard to then say, oh, before you go home, come, I'm gonna do a blood test on you. And the guy in the lab, this genius, was so frustrated. He goes, what's the big deal? It's like an x-ray, right? And I kept trying to explain to him, this is a really scary experience. Yes, you're a genius, but you need to understand the framework and context within women are experiencing this. And it wasn't until years later that his wife went for a mammogram that he said, my God, I really had no idea. So we need to change who is doing the research and have a diversity of spirits and expertise and backgrounds so that we are as inclusive as we should be. And I just want to give a shout out to Robin in straightening her crown for all of us and empowering all of us in all sorts of spaces to find power and strength in movement and our bodies. You've changed my life. And I probably would not be here and I would not have written my book had you not told me to straighten my own crown. So thank you.
Amazing. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. Joanna, I'm going to pop over to you now. MIDI Health, I am a huge fan. You really stepped up at a time before the world had finally woken up, which I believe they have today. At this point, the world realizes that 100% of 50% of the population
Really?
goes through menopause. I know.
Can you believe it's
it?
not a niche market?
I know. And it sounds almost, silly at this point because that conversation is so out there. But I can only imagine that when you were pounding the pavement and when you were raising money and talking to VC firms, that the reception maybe is not what we would hope and expect it would be today. So I want to talk to you about how investors do play a role in advancing women's health research and female-founded companies and female health companies. Where are the gaps? How can we close them? And are there any opportunities you want to mention?
So, you say invest in women, and that is a mantra, right? Women start great companies. We have to get investment in women so they can build those huge companies, because once more people see large companies built by women, they will then fund more companies like that. It is definitely it's a virtuous cycle, and I think we all have to understand that. And we have to get women funded at all parts of the cycle. We have to get the angel funds thinking about women. We have to get the A and the B and the public markets all thinking about the fact that women outperform and women are great entrepreneurs and great CEOs and can build enormous companies. And just like when we're talking about Maven, we need a lot of great women's health companies that are funded, because then there will be more of them. There's no way around it. We all pattern match, right? And so it is true. And a few years ago when we started talking to investors about menopause, they just looked at us like we were crazy. Like, why would this matter? And it took a lot of convincing that it would matter. And I am eternally grateful to those initial investors who were willing to bet on us. Now it's a lot easier. Now we have hundreds of thousands of people. Insurance companies are paying for us. They can see we're making significant revenue. Much easier to invest. So I think that we have to all rally around building big women's health companies, because it is going to then build more of them. There's no way around it. Like, once you see a few, you start getting confidence that there's going to be more. And so, take those initial bets, bet on a lot of early stages. Some of them are what early money is like yeast, right? We all know about that saying. It is so true in women's health as well. And so we all have to be funding them early and then funding them often so that we can create a lot of great companies. I'm just so confident they will exist. I have an incredible amount of confidence that whether it's this room, just the research alone in this room could create multi-billion-dollar companies. So we just need to take the research and channel it and execute.
Amazing. Thank you, Joanna. Okay, we are down to the last few seconds. But Nancy, I want to give you a quick opportunity to speak about your perspective at the AHA. Anything you want to respond to or close us out with?
Well, I think these amazing women, just go to show the power of women working together can make anything happen. And that's certainly what we believe at the AHA, whether it's through our targeted research funding, our new Go Red for Women venture fund that we've just launched to close the gap in investment in women's cardiovascular health. And I would like to say our Research Goes Red registry, where instead of asking women to participate in something that a researcher cares about, we are focused on what is it that the women want to have studied. And so that's an important angle as well, because they care a lot about every single thing that we've talked about today.
Thank you. That is very exciting. I want to thank each of you for sharing your personal connection to women's health and for being such amazing luminaries and advocates in this space. I know that I learned a lot today. I feel very inspired by each of you. I'm certain this audience does. And I also know that you will continue to inspire the rest of the world. So thank you very much.
Distinguished guests, please remain in your seats as we transition for our closing remarks. Thank you. guests, the President of the United States and Dr. Biden.
You're so quiet. It's like a classroom. So in the intermission, were you all like dancing and everything? Get a little movement. You know, you've been sitting for a while, so thank you for standing. But, you know, I'm glad you get a little, like you said, Robin, a little movement, right? That's what it's all about. So, oh, please sit down, please. If you feel all stretched out by now. So before I begin, I just want to say I'm so glad that you got to come here today because the White House is decorated. And the theme this year is peace and light. So I hope that you all feel that sense of, you know, peace and light, and that just for a moment when you leave here today that you feel, I don't know, a sense of joy. Because I think we all need like this, you know, we all need to feel joy now during this time of the season, during this time. So anyway, okay, now I'll start. You're all reading into that. Anyway, for decades, for centuries even, at dinner tables and in waiting rooms, in whispered conversations, you know, when we meet our friends for coffee, women have been talking to each other about our health. Isn't that true? Yes. So today we brought that conversation to the White House. Today we are saying to women everywhere, we hear you, and we will get you the answers you need. So thank you for joining us for the White House Conference on Women's Health Research. The United States has the best health research in the world. Yet women's health is understudied and research is underfunded, and so many of you have said this. And the United States economy loses $1.8 billion in working time every year to menopause symptoms that upend women's lives. And that's what Maria Shriver and I talked about on that Saturday afternoon in April last year. So Maria keeps this quote next to her phone. You have a stationary phone? In her office, and it says, why go to the moon? And your uncle, President Kennedy, asked, we choose to go to the moon in this decade and do other things, not because they are easy, because they are hard. So, Maria, thank you for carrying on that mission, pushing for breakthroughs that are never easy but possible. Thank you. So a little more than a year ago, President Biden launched, thank you, Joe, the first ever White House initiative on women's health research, building on the foundation of decades of work in women's health from many of you in this room. And Carolyn made sure yesterday, as we were doing speech prep, that I understood. She said, Jill, you know, I know that we're doing this now, but there are some women like Carolyn who's been doing this research forever and ever and ever. And I just want you to say, we recognize that. So. So you heard from Carolyn, you know, our incredible team here at the White House who's ensured that government-funded research, you know, and they will include women from the beginning. And that means designing studies and separating the data, which everyone has said, and reporting findings to create treatments specifically for women and for men. I mean, we're not going to leave you guys out. And we've invested nearly $1 billion in this research on women's health. So over this past year, I've traveled around the country, and I have met, honestly, some really incredible researchers. And I've been to universities and the New York Stock Exchange to bring people together and create connections across industries. And the women of this country are paying attention. Researchers and business leaders are too. So we brought all of you into this room to elevate all this information, discoveries that will change how we treat menopause symptoms. We've talked about this all this morning. Research that uses genetics to find the cause of extreme morning sickness. And I heard this a couple weeks ago, and I was particularly interested because my own granddaughter was going through the same thing. Because we're going to be great-grandparents. So funders and founders who are seeing the market for women's health products triple. Advocates who are making sure that women know that solutions are at our fingertips if we just keep fighting for them. Together, we've laid down a new line, a marker of our progress toward closing the gaps in women's health. Everything that you've heard today, and hasn't it been like so informative and fascinating? I mean, I love these forums because I always learn something new. It's just so inspiring because this is our new normal. And today isn't the finish line. It's the starting point. We, all of us, we have built the momentum. Now it's up to us to make it unstoppable. It has been the honor of my life to serve as your First Lady and to join you in this work. But my work doesn't stop in January when Joe and I leave this house. I will keep building alliances like the ones that brought us here today. And I will keep pushing for funding for innovative research. So join me. Be the researcher who makes sure that each proposal you work on considers women from the beginning. Be the investor who searches for the next breakthrough product of treatment. Be the voice in every space, from boardrooms to classrooms to laboratories, who asks, what are we doing to advance women's health? Let's make a promise to all those women out there right now, sitting in a parking lot somewhere after a doctor's appointment, wondering why you're not being heard. So maybe feeling, like you're all alone. And I'll just have to stop here for 1 second. I did hear during that little intermission thing, like, we're not putting our doctors down, right? So some doc in the back said, it sounds like you're putting the docs down. We're not putting the docs down. I don't want you to feel that way, but I think the docs are joining us and saying, hey, we want the answers. So I just want to make that 100% clear. So the White House, all of us here, we will keep fighting for you until your worries turn into answers, your symptoms into solutions, until women everywhere benefit from the life-saving and world-changing research that we know is possible. A new future can ring out from this conference, one that answers the call from women who have been waiting for too long. Let this be the moment that we push harder, The moment that people say, change the world of women's health forever. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Please. So I'm so grateful to have a president who heard us and took action quickly. So without Joe, really, this wouldn't have been made possible. And that's the power of someone who understands how to make things happen in government. Because God knows, Joe, you've been here for what, 50 years? So someone who has fundamentally shifted how our nation approaches women's health research. So please welcome my husband, your president and champion, I think, of all of us. So my husband, Joe Biden. Come on, Joe.
Thank you. Thank God she said yes the 5th time I asked her to marry me. Please, have a seat. You know, as they used to say in the Senate, a point of personal privilege. When no man deserves one great love, let alone two, when I was introduced to Jill, my youngest brother, said, you'll love her. She hates politics. Well, look, hello, everyone. My name's Joe Biden. I'm Jill Biden's husband. Let's be honest, we wouldn't be here today without Jill. Across our administration and across Congress, across the country, the work we're doing on women's health research is some of the most important work this administration has ever done. And I've always believed that our nation is at its best when we plumb the endless possibilities that exist for all our women and girls. And that includes their health. Women are half our population, to state the obvious. But like Jill said, for too long they've been underrepresented when it comes to health research. And that's real. You know, that's why over a year ago, we launched the first ever White House initiative on women's health research. And the goal was to fundamentally change and improve how we approach and invest in women's health research. We weren't doing enough of it. And to pioneer the next generation of scientific research and discoveries that are going to improve care for women receive all across the country. Because the fact is, the health of our moms and grandmothers, sisters and daughters, friends and colleagues affects not just women's well-being, but the prosperity of the entire nation. And that's a fact. We haven't gotten that through to the other team yet. No, I mean it, across the board. Anyway, I won't get into it. But that's why in my State of the Union address this year, I called on Congress to invest $12 billion in women's health research to benefit millions of lives and families and communities all across America. Folks, but my administration wasn't going to wait for Congress to secure the funding. We looked for other ways to prioritize women's health with existing dollars that are already in the government and to get important work started. And I knew where to start. Rosa DeLauro. Rosa, stand up. I'm not joking. They say in Southern, y'all think I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. She's incredible. Every important thing I've ever tried to get done, no one paid attention to, you were there for me. I mean it sincerely. You're the best, Rosa. What you did on child tax credit, I mean, across the board. And folks, women's health is something that matters so very much. Along with members of her today, she's going to keep this effort going when we leave, when Jill and I leave. Well, we're going to fight like hell. We're no longer going to be president and first lady, but we're not going away. And so, along with other members here like Diane and Lauren. Where's Diane? There you go. Stand up, kiddo. Let me see you. And Lauren. Thank you. So I'm so proud that to date we've secured $1 billion so far in women's health research from different government agencies. You know, our new agency, ARPA-H, which is patterned after it's called Advanced Research Projects and Agencies for Health, is based on DARPA, which is the Defense Department program, or Advanced Research and Projects Agency. That drove breakthroughs. The Defense Department broke breakthroughs in everything from the internet to GPS. It had a big budget for doing everything else, but it also had this specific individual budget. And ARPA-H does for biomedicine what DARPA does for technology, driving breakthroughs to prevent, detect, and treat diseases including cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, and so much more. We're using their funding to drive breakthroughs in women's health and ovarian cancer and menopause and migraines and high blood pressure for pregnant women. The National Institute of Health is using their funding to break down the silos. A lot of silos in government, a lot of silos across America, to make more progress and do it more quickly. For example, we know that heart disease is the leading cause of death for women, but we don't know enough about how menopause may affect heart disease. And that's going to change now. We're going to learn so much more. And the Department of Defense is dedicating funds to research women's health issues like arthritis, cancer, chronic fatigue that affect women in the military. But this research is going to benefit all women, all women. Our work doesn't stop here. Look, you know, in addition to launching the Women's Health Research Initiative earlier this year, I signed an executive order that directing the most comprehensive set of executive actions ever taken in the history of this country to improve women's health issues. And look, it ensures that women's health is integrated and prioritized all across the entire federal government, all research projects and budget plans, across the entire government. It spurs new research and innovation, a wide range of women's health needs throughout their lives. And it does so much more, so much more. Folks, there's literally never been more comprehensive effort from the federal government to spur innovation in women's health research in our entire history. And thank you, by the way, kiddo. I mean, if I can digress for a moment, I have been the beneficiary of a lot of the research been done. I had 2 cranial aneurysms, 2 9-hour operations. Took the top of my head off twice, couldn't find a brain the first time. But all kidding aside, I mean, research is going on across the entire world. I visited every single solitary major health center in the world, 7 of them. And, you know, a lot, what happens even in not just women's research, but, you know, docs who are great, they walk by the mirror and they see a Pulitzer Prize, a Nobel Prize about to be won rather than sharing the data. But that's all changing. That's all changing. And this initiative lays the groundwork for discoveries and research for generations to come. Mark my words. And the benefits we gain tomorrow will happen because we made the decision to do something about them today, now. And all of you in this room are leading the way, and that's not hyperbole, you really are. It's a hell of a combination of people to make things change. Let me close with this. And my daughter Ashley is sitting here. She runs she works for women. She runs a women's health center shelters in Philadelphia. And you know, this holiday season is time not for gratitude, but for reflection. Gratitude's important, but we got to reflect on what's going on. And let me say to you that it's been an honor in my life to serve as your president the last 4 years. But I'm forever grateful. I really am. But it's not a joke. We're blessed to live in America. We're blessed to live in America. I've been over 140 countries. I mean, but for the grace of God, it could have been born in a lot of other places. Literally the greatest country on earth. That's who we are. But we got to raise up even more than we are now. I often say America can be summed up in one word. I was on the Tibetan plateau with Xi Jinping, and he said, "Can you define America for me?" And this is all on the record. I said, "Yes, one word, possibilities." Think about it. We're the only nation in the world where people, they think there's arrogance in that. but we've never failed to get things done when we set our mind to it. It's all about possibilities. Anything's possible. That's what the Women's Health Research Initiative is all about. Possibilities. You know, and that's what this conference is all about. That's what you're all about. Researchers, innovators, investors, businesses, advocates, elected officials, public, private, and nonprofit leaders, unleashing the drive and discovery and the talent and imagination that you have in this room. A spirit of innovation inherent in who you guys are. I really mean it. Think about it. Turn and look at the people you're left and right of you know are engaged in this. It's all about the possibilities and belief we can do things, we can change things fundamentally. I think inherent in the American conscience, setting a bold vision and taking concrete steps to make our dreams reality. Holding on to one more thing that we can never lose, hope. Hope, hope, hope. Because what we need to raise the expectations of the American people up. We got to let them know we haven't forgotten. Whether it's in business or labor or whether it's politics, whatever, we haven't forgotten. You guys go out there, you take care of all these folks. Guess what? How many think that we just sort of forgotten? Why haven't we focused? Because of you and your fearless determination, you're making real progress. You're really making progress. There's still so much more to do, and we're going to take all of us to get it done. I know it's a battle, but I know I have a hell of an army here. You know, when I look around at all of you here today, and I mean this sincerely, I know it's a battle we're going to win. We're going to win this battle. You just have to remember who in the hell we are. We're the United States of America. And there's nothing we've ever set our mind to we've been unable to do when we've done it together. It's not beyond our capacity when we work together. And that's what you're all doing, working together. And so I want to close by thanking my wife for Jill. I tell you, like I said, when we got married, my brother said, "Don't worry, she doesn't like politics." Well, I tell you what, you stepped up, kid. You stepped up. And in case you wonder, when she speaks, I listen. Thank you all so very, very much. Let's get this done. Thank you.